Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Tuesday morning to you all. I hope you folks are doing well out there this morning and having a fantastic start to your last day of April. Yes, I mean, here we are about to head off into May. Pretty crazy stuff. But unfortunately, we do have another threat of significant severe weather for your last day of April and for your first day of May tomorrow, but we'll get into that at the very end of the video. But that's what we're here to discuss. We'll spend a lot of time on that, of course. Some of the same areas are going to get impacted by some nasty storms that were slammed Friday. Of course, we know what happened in like Nebraska, areas of Iowa and surrounding states with a tornado outbreak. I'm not expecting a tornado outbreak today. I'm not expecting it. But we do have a threat of significant severe weather. So we'll really get detailed on that. We'll break down a few different states in great detail. We'll talk about the threat levels, the evolution, timing of these storms, and really just pump you guys out some really detailed information, just like we always do. And then we'll cover the entire lower 48. After we do that, we'll jump in a little bit into tomorrow's significant severe weather threat, which will be positioned a little bit further south than today's severe weather risk. Talk about what's driving it, the ingredients, and potentially what the radar could look like across the central plains for tomorrow. So we have an active next couple days of weather, unfortunately. Hopefully we can get into a period where things can settle down a little bit. But of course, we are in the heart of severe weather season here in the spring. So with all that being said, if you guys have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it. Just want to thank y'all for being so encouraging yesterday. I felt like the video was very sloppy. Of course, we are going to have some sloppy videos on here when you're pumping out a video every single day, sometimes 2 videos a day. But thank y'all for being nice. You know, some people say they don't even notice it. I know I do, and the more I think about it in the video, the more I screw it up. So thank y'all for being encouraging, loving, and just really love and appreciate the YouTube family we got going on here. But if you guys got anything that I can pray about or pray over, as always, please put those in the comments below. Of course, we're praying for you folks impacted by the nasty weather over the last several days, the weekend, especially in Oklahoma. So with all that being said, let's get rocking and rolling. So we got a lot of rain kind of on the west side of the Appalachian Mountains right now. A lot of rain falling in eastern Tennessee. Some rain, even some embedded thunderstorms in northern Alabama. Some heavy rain in northern Georgia, stretching all the way to central and eastern Kentucky. Basically going right through the heart of Ohio, all the way up in Ontario. We even got a lot of storms making their way through like central New York right now. They'll eventually trail off into Vermont, New Hampshire. We got a little flow that's going, I would say, southwest and northeast, but eventually it kind of pivots as it rounds a ridge and actually starts to flow out the northwest. As you can tell, it kind of like hooks right into here. So pretty cool stuff here with the flow aloft. But then we got moisture already ahead of this lower pressure, the shortwave trough that's going to eject across the country at the southeast edge of this area of low pressure centered over like the northern Rockies. And because you had that lower pressure, you got this rain across areas of eastern Montana this morning, a little bit of a spin going on. And on the cooler side, you got a little bit of snow. Snow levels are pretty low here in the Pacific Northwest. I saw some video from some people in the weather community that I follow on social media and showing some of those snow levels pretty low in the Pacific Northwest. So we do have kind of a fire hose of moisture working its way through the northern Oregon coastline and then pretty much all of western Washington. The southern tier of the country pretty quiet this morning. So that's what's going on right now. Let's continue to move forward. A lot of dense fog across the southern and central Mississippi Valley, a region east and west of it, with just some kind of a boundary between warm and cool air, which typically creates a lot of fog. We still have some lingering flood watches up in areas of Kansas, some red flag warnings up for areas of Montana and North Dakota. But I do think that this rain will help you guys here in eastern Montana over the next day or so. We got some high wind warnings and watches here in southeast Wyoming, and then some winter weather alerts up here in Montana. Some of these higher elevations got some winter weather advisories, winter storm watches, even some winter storm warnings, and a couple of freeze warnings scattered about across the west. So not a very active morning, but certainly some energy flying around out there. The excessive rainfall outlook, we'll watch for some heavy rains today across the Northeast, but not a big deal. But we do have this little slight risk right here where you guys have already gotten a lot of rain over the last few days. So this is probably what's making them put this slight risk here. And that means in the yellow, you have at least a 15% chance of rainfall exceeding flash flood guidance within 25 miles at any given point. So just be mindful of some heavy rain over the next 24 hours in Kansas, areas of Oklahoma. So let's jump right into the severe weather threat. As always, just note some of this information could change in the later updates. It typically, that's cool. It typically happens a lot the day of a severe weather event. But we have an enhanced risk, and we're going to zoom into the highest threat level area, which is this region here in a second, but I do want to take that broad look at it. First, I want to note there is a risk of thunderstorms today, all the way from the northeast, all the way down to the southeast. So, we're not expecting really any way of any kind of like severe weather. Of course, you can't rule out one or two strong to severe storms, but there is a risk for some thunderstorms all across the east today. In fact, looking like a good shot, we're going to see some thunderstorms across like South Carolina, which is where I live. And, I'm not pulling for any kind of damaging thunderstorms, but it would be cool to see get some rain. We haven't had a whole lot of rain. It's starting to get dry in areas of the southeast because we just have been just stuck in a kind of a drier pattern. But this is, of course, where the center of the worst weather is going to be. Marginal risk extends all the way down to Fort Stockton, all the way up to Minneapolis. And you do have the slight risk right in here, level 2 out of 5, and the enhanced risk, which is a level 3 out of 5. So I do want to note down here into Oklahoma, Texas, storms will be much more conditional, isolated, but anybody that does get hit by a storm down here in Oklahoma and Kansas, it could pack a punch for sure. And we'll take a look at what the radar shows today. The latest long-range HRRR model shows for this area for today. But let's zoom into this area. Okay, so an enhanced risk up, level 3 out of 5 for Ames, Des Moines, Omaha, I would say is in the slight risk, but St. Joseph, Topeka, Kansas City, right on the fringe of the slight and enhanced risk. The slight risk does include Sioux City, Mason City, Waterloo, I can't tell which one, Iowa City, or Kirksville, down to Emporia, Hutchinson, Wichita, and does include a very small section of Oklahoma. So, of course, in the dark green is the level 1 out of 5 risk, which is a marginal risk. Not expecting as active weather in that area, but it's certainly possible in Dubuque, Davenport, even into areas of like Wisconsin. Some energy will eventually make its way to you guys later on this evening and definitely could promote some severe weather. So what is this driven off of? Well, this kind of looks like a similar outlook as Friday, right? If we remember, enhanced risk right over this area. But if you notice, the tornado threat's not as high today. Now, I will note this could upgrade to a 10% risk. Okay, I just want to keep reiterating that. So I don't want anybody in the comments saying, Mitch, you're giving us old information. I had one, Sunday say something like, the enhanced risk area is not that big. Well, the information does change. Around 8:30 to 8:45, the Storm Prediction Center will drop another outlook, and a lot of times it's different. So it just happens the day of an event. But in the brown area, you have a 5% risk of a tornado within 25 miles in any given location. Omaha, Lincoln, Sioux City, Spencer, Ames, Waterloo, Des Moines, Kansas City, St. Joseph, Emporia, Wichita, Topeka, if I said that already, Manhattan. So you guys, 5% risk of a tornado. And in the green, that's a 2% risk of a tornado within 25 miles in a given location. All right, the severe wind outlook. We do have a chance of damaging winds today. In fact, I think this is higher than it was Friday, I believe. But the yellow, 15% risk of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour. But if you see kind of, inside this yellow area, you have this black outline region, which means there's a chance of significant winds, which is a 10% chance, not added on to that 15% risk to make 25. It's its own deal. There's a 10% risk of winds exceeding 65 knots or higher, which if you don't know what knots are, and I don't blame you, I have to look at like a converter chart sometimes too myself, but that's winds basically pushing 70 to 75 miles per hour or higher. Category 1 hurricane force winds. So we're going to have some nasty winds with some of these storms today. And then you look at the hail outlook. This is really what's driving this enhanced risk right now. In the red, you got a 30% chance of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour. In the yellow, that's a 15% risk of that. And of course, there's a hatched risk with this too. So in this hatch risk area, this black outline area with the black dashes going in between it, that means you have a 10% chance of hail exceeding 2 inch in diameter or larger. Okay, so hail is definitely a big deal today also. So let's go on and take a look at what the HRRR model shows for some of these states. All right, let's start off by looking at Nebraska. Now, most of Nebraska will be pretty calm today. It's really the extreme eastern and southeastern portions of the state right over here. So we'll start this morning. Not a whole lot going on. Some showers drifting through. And we start to get into, as you can tell, we can start to get to about lunchtime, 11 a.m. If you're confused about the time frame, look up here. It's right here. I know it's probably pretty small on your phone screen or desktop screen, whatever you're watching this on. But back this up 1 hour because this is in Central Time, and I cannot change this to Central Time. So this is in Eastern Time, so it's 11 a.m. because I will forget to mention time frames. But you keep this going. Check out this storm right here, like near the Sioux Falls, Sioux Cities region. We got some storms already rumbling through pretty early in the day. I don't think they'll do a whole lot. It's really what happens as we are starting to get into the middle portion of the afternoon. You see these storms right here to form. You got to watch all these storms right into here. These could produce all hazards. I would say the further north you get, you know, the more that you lack thermodynamics. But I'm telling you, there's going to be a severe weather threat with these storms too. It's around 4 p.m., you know, well north of Omaha. Nothing really going on in Omaha quite yet. But you see this nasty storm working into Iowa. We'll talk about Iowa here in a second. But then bang, I mean, check it out. It goes from 6 p.m. to 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Look at these storms that kind of, you know, explode down here in southeastern sections of Nebraska. But I'm telling you, I know it looks like these storms skip right over Omaha or Lincoln. They could very well be right on top of you guys. Okay, but by the time you do get to the late evening hours, this is pretty much done. And I will take a look at the NAM for this area too. I'm not going to compare and contrast each model guidance a whole lot, but I will do it for Nebraska. If you look at the NAM, the storms form before they get to Omaha, around Lincoln. You see these kind of scattered storms about. This is around 4 p.m. And like I said, these storms can produce all hazards. Tornado threat not as high today, but it could increase. And then they kind of develop into a sweeping line as they trail off into Missouri, Kansas, and then Iowa. And then they head on off. So what about the updraft velocity swath with this? So remember, this just indicates the rotation with some of these storms with this particular run of this particular model. Okay, just because you see highlighted colors, I don't mean there's going to be a tornado in that area. It just means it's trying to symbolize rotation with these storms. So, I mean, already kind of earlier in the afternoon, it likes rotation with these storms right around. I always forget Sioux Falls, Sioux Cities. Which one is it? It's Sioux City. Sioux City. Sioux Falls is a little bit further north, if I'm saying that correctly. So, you know, Sioux City, you know, you guys could get some storms capable of producing some tornadoes. I mean, pretty early in the afternoon, you know, anywhere from 3 to 6 p.m. You got to watch. And then it's these storms that kind of bubble up right down here. And they could, like I said, they could develop a little bit further west that will have the capability of producing some tornadoes. But if you notice, most of the state of Nebraska, I mean, like almost 90% of the state of Nebraska, you know, is not going to have to deal with any kind of crazy weather today. It's just the extreme eastern counties that's going to have to deal with it today. So please be mindful of that. Now, let's jump on down to Kansas. Okay. We'll start off this morning. Not a whole lot going on. You keep this rolling. We're at like 3 p.m. Still nothing going on. 5 p.m., 6 p.m., bang, there you go. 6 p.m., storms form right up here, and Topeka's right into here. These storms develop, and there it is. There's those strong storms, the severe storms, and most likely they're severe in southeastern sections of Nebraska. But you got to watch here in especially northeastern sections of Kansas. These storms will develop, and then they will really grow upscale and really develop into kind of a slow-moving, kind of seeping south line of storms, if you will. 7 p.m., this particular run says, you know, hey, this is working its way right through Topeka, getting down to Imperium. What is it? I'm sorry, guys. I keep jumping. You know, I do a lot of stuff on the fly here. Emporia. You know, it's starting to affect you guys at this point. These storms are dipping south, 9 p.m. You know, this particular run says this line of storms, as you can tell, look, it's kind of moving like northwest to southeast, and then they kind of almost start moving north to south. And it's because you kind of get the surface low gets away from this convection. Therefore, you kind of lose a forward motion with these storms, if that makes any sense at all. But 9 p.m., these storms are just kind of sitting here, not moving a whole lot. They are oozing southward. But this is like 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m. And remember, look, Kansas City right into here. You want to watch in Kansas City. This is around 8 p.m. I would say the time frame for Kansas City might be like 7 to 9 p.m., give or take an hour. You guys are getting hit at that point. And then these storms start to dip southward, and this is around midnight. I mean, look, they kind of only go from right here, 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, 4 hour, 5 hour, 6 hour, 7 hour. 8 hour. I mean, these storms are barely moving. It takes them like 8 hours to go from Topeka all the way to the Kansas-Oklahoma line. So that's why there is a slight risk of flooding right in here in Kansas City. I'm not in Kansas City, in portions of the state of Kansas. All right, so the updraft velocity swath with this, here it comes. You see, it picks up on that line, and it does have rotation with this storm. Could be broad, could be tight. If it's tight rotation, it has the capability of producing a tornado. But there's that signal right in here, this highlighted color area right near Kansas City. You want to watch. Tornadoes can hit bigger towns and cities. We know that. Nashville is a great example of that. In Dallas, we've had some tornadoes around that area, and we had a tornado go right through Atlanta several years back. So, bigger cities aren't exempt from tornadoes. I know there is a kind of a myth that they are, but they're not. So please be mindful, in the higher populated regions of like Kansas City. But I mean, you look at all this right down here, it's really showing some solid rotation with some of these storms eventually kind of oozing off into Oklahoma. But I do want to mention, and I didn't have this pulled up, I'm going to do it on the fly here. I do want to mention the flooding risk with these storms. The National Weather Service is really liking the idea of what the HRRR model says and shows this area of 1 to 2 inches of rain with these storms. So if you live down here in southeastern and southern areas of Kansas, particularly in this region right here, you could get a few inches of rain from these storms. So don't ignore the flooding threat with this today. Now, of course, Iowa's been a heavy topic over the last several weeks, and here it is again. Starting it off this morning, some storms could already be rumbling later this morning through northwestern sections of Iowa. And, we can't discredit these or disregard these. These could, pack a punch, especially as we start to get the prime heating of the day. You got to watch the southern flank of these storms right in here. You see these storms. If you live in like northwestern Iowa, northern Iowa, you want to watch these storms right into here. And this could really develop into something, or it could diminish and the energy kind of gets transferred to all this back here. Now, you get to 4 p.m., these storms are making their way out of areas of like South Dakota, Nebraska. And this is when you want to be definitely mindful of the weather at this point. It's around 5 p.m. You got some nasty storms up here in northwestern Iowa. But look at these storms on the southern flank of these. You see like western Iowa. You see, if you live right here in this region, please, take this serious because, the HRRR model could be on to something. And then this really turns into almost kind of a broken line of storms. And the more broken it is, I would say the higher the tornado threat will be. So you got a lot of things going on here around 6 p.m. if this model is right. You got this line of storms up here kind of, I would say, riding the Iowa-Minnesota line. And then you kind of have this broken up line of storms. And folks, I'm telling you, large hail, I cannot talk again, very large hail, damaging winds, and a tornado risk will be there with all these storms sweeping through western to central Iowa all the way down into northwestern Missouri. Okay, and then this kind of groups up into that line, starts to blast through Ames, Des Moines, and this is around 7 p.m. All hazards are on the table with this, and these continue. They start to dip more to the southeast, out the northwest. And then I would say they start to lose somewhat of that severity level. But look at these storms up here in southern Minnesota. We'll talk about that here in a second. And then 10 p.m., 11 p.m., they start to make their way into the eastern sections of Iowa. Dubuque, Davenport, you guys start to get hit with this. And then this trails off into a kind of a broken line of storms into Illinois after midnight tonight. So the updraft velocity swath with this, same deal. There's some morning action right up here, but it's really what forms this afternoon that you got to watch out for. And that was the same run I just showed you, but this is just the updraft velocity swath from the run I just showed you, indicating lots of rotation with these storms. Lots of rotation, okay? So we have to watch out for this, but very large hail, damaging winds with this. If you look at the predicted wind gust swath from this, and I mean, this is from the latest, let's see. Go back to this. The latest run, you see embedded 40, 50, 55 mile per hour wind gusts in this line of storms. So please be mindful of that also. And then we just kind of look at the Missouri and Illinois area. Missouri is going to be an area to watch, especially the northwestern corner of the state. So if you live up here, Kansas City points north. This is around 7 p.m. Storms are working their way through the northwestern portion of the state. Once you get to northern Missouri, they start to get broken up. Might start to lose some steam, but I still think they're packing a punch. They start to make their way down to maybe Kirksville late this evening, right around midnight. But it starts to really break up here. But you see this line of storms right here that's kind of attached to the line of storms we just talked about in Kansas. We will watch this, but I do think they'll be more intense in Kansas. And then all that energy that heads out of Iowa, let's back it up, will move into Illinois after midnight tonight. And, northern Illinois, you guys can get some showers, some storms. The further south and southwest you work, the more intense these storms will be. But by the time you get into the wee hours of the morning, this entire line is fizzling out more than likely before it even gets all the way down to Indiana. So we do need to be mindful of some tornadoes, especially more so in areas of Missouri. And this only goes out to about 10 p.m., but it is highlighting northwestern Missouri for more of that high-end tornado threat. I wouldn't say a high-end, but the higher tornado threat. So if we do speak about the ingredients with this really fast, this morning you're waking up with dry, stable conditions. It's really what happens throughout the morning hours and how the atmosphere changes that really gets this severe weather risk going. So we start to get to about midday. Dew points start to climb out the 40s into the 50s in Iowa. You're starting to get dew points in the 60s, which if you're saying, Mitch, I don't know what you're talking about with dew points. Dew points in the 60s, that's when you start to get to that criteria that really supports severe weather. It's what we call a thermodynamic. Thermodynamics is your surface moisture, your CAPE levels, your storm energy, your surface temperatures, your lapse rates, and all of those things. Okay. Kinematics is all your wind energy and lift in the atmosphere. So you start to get to about, I would say 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you start to get pockets of dew points reaching into the low 60s. Now, I can tell you a lot of times the H-strip oral model underdoes moisture. So I would say that, your dew points are probably more widespread in the low 60s in this area. But, not as that high-end moisture that was for Friday, which I think is the big difference maker in this event than last Friday's event. But you still got pockets of dew points in the upper 50s, low 60s in this region. And this continues. I mean, especially down here in Kansas, you do not have a moisture problem down here at all. Just maybe not as much lift, but you're going to get some nasty thunderstorms in eastern Kansas, especially later on this evening. But you see plenty of moisture to work with. So, yeah, and, and the fact that you got all that moisture to work with, you got plenty of CAPE levels. I mean, probably reaching over the 15 to 2,000 joules per kilogram mark that rides all the way up into here in pockets, all the way up into Iowa. And then if you look at the lift in the atmosphere, this is your mid-level jet. Starting off this morning, not a whole lot going on, but you'll start to see the impulse of winds aloft that really moves in. This is what you call the exit region of the mid-level jet with the associated shortwave trough, surface low energy, whatever it may be. And you see kind of where it dramatically goes from 25, 28 knots to like 50 knots plus in areas. That is your lifting mechanism for thunderstorms, which is right into here. And this will continue. This will increase, escalate that damaging wind threat very quickly as this mid-level jet, which if you don't know where the mid-level jet sits, 500 millibars, like 19,000 feet up in the air. And we talk about that low-level jet a lot too, which sits about a mile above our heads, 4,000 or 6,000 feet up, give or take 1,000 or 500 feet. But we talk about this a lot when we talk about kinematics, and this goes right over areas of Nebraska, right over areas of Iowa and surrounding states into here. So please be mindful of the severe weather threat today in these areas. So my folks in the southeast, you're dealing with the storms this morning in certain areas, nothing too bad. We get into this afternoon, we could deal with some storms here in southern Alabama, the panhandle of Florida, especially the western areas, some scattered showers and storms, some spring storms could possibly rumble through Georgia. All this energy, and I will mention, we could get some more later in eastern areas of Kansas, and speaking about Kansas so much, Kentucky, up into West Virginia also. But as this energy kind of gets, I would say, east of the Appalachian Mountains, some more energy will fire up with the daytime heating. Now, this is getting into about 8 p.m. Look at these storms kind of rumbling through central Florida, kind of developing, kind of almost pulse storms, and then they kind of implode, if you will. But you see these storms up here in the Carolinas, Georgia. We'll have to watch for those, and then they'll kind of lose some steam as we get into the overnight hours. But there could still be some rain and storms that's greeting you guys along the Carolina coastline and in central Virginia. Up here in the Northeast today, dealing with a little bit of action already. We could get some kind of clearing, and then some energy will fly through this afternoon. We could get some storms. I would not be surprised if we see a marginal risk in New York State today. There's a couple isolated cells. I mean, look up here in the Adirondacks. Down here in central New York State, some storms down here near the Finger Lakes region, the southern tier. Look at these storms down here in like areas of northern PA. And we could get some showers and some downpours across southeastern Ohio, West Virginia, into western Maryland. And there's a lot going on here, but just nothing too crazy. But then you could get kind of a developing line of storms. I really do think you have a shot for a marginal risk. Right now there's not. I mean, you look at this, there's just a general risk of thunderstorms. But I think this will change for this area. I really do. But line of storms sweeping through. Definitely a stormy late afternoon, evening. And this continues. We'll get a little bit of rain down here potentially for areas of Maryland, northern VA, southeastern PA. And look at this rain moving into southern New England and all of New England. It kind of dwindles out a little bit. Could get some snowflakes mixing in up here in Maine, very possible. And then all this energy kind of heads on off. Could be just left with some damp conditions as you're waking up tomorrow morning. But do be mindful of some storms, especially in New York State today. South Central U.S., we kind of already talked about this. Well, no, we haven't. I'm getting ahead of myself. There is a risk of severe weather down here in the South Central U.S. We've already spoke about Kansas. That's what I meant to say. But you see these supercells bubbling up down here. There'll be some high-end energy in the atmosphere. It's just you're lacking a flow aloft. So these storms will pop up, explode, not move a whole lot, and then they'll diminish very quickly because there's no flow aloft really keeping these storms going. So as you notice, bang, they pop up and then they'll diminish. And here's a closer look at this for Texas and Oklahoma, because there is a threat of severe weather in Oklahoma too. But there's those storms. These could be disruptive if you just happen to get hit by them. They're just going to be very conditional, very isolated. But you see these storms right up in here, down here in southwest Texas, all the way up to just north of Abilene. Could get some storms all the way into Oklahoma too. It's just, they look like they're going to definitely get going down here. In fact, you could get a slight risk down here issued. I think right now, just a marginal risk. Yeah, could get a slight risk embedded in this marginal risk down here. I wouldn't be surprised one bit. But let's be mindful of these storms today. They can be very disrupted if you just happen to get hit by one. So the north central U.S., kind of a lot of small things going on too. You're going to have just an area of moderate to heavy rain that's going to pivot through North Dakota today. We could get some nasty storms in southern Minnesota, more so heavy rain the further into central Minnesota you get. And then all this rain will kind of head into Wisconsin, all this energy. You could still be dealing, I think, Rochester? You could be getting hit by a pretty nasty storm later this evening in Rochester, Minnesota. It's very possible. And all this energy begins to hit all the communities and towns and cities and western sections of Wisconsin overnight. But we got to see how much steam these storms have. They could lose some punch very quickly as they had out of Minnesota and Iowa. We'll see what happens. Some rain starts to take over the UP of Michigan overnight after midnight tonight especially, and you might even get some rumbles of thunder in the UP tonight. And then rain will, like I said, likely move in after midnight tonight in the UP, and then maybe by the time you wake up tomorrow morning, you're about done with it. So, a little bit closer look at my friends here in Minnesota. Some storms will get going as early as like early to mid-afternoon in southern sections of Minnesota, but it's this line of storms I am concerned about. So if you live in these southern counties of Minnesota, kind of south of Minneapolis, I would say, see this nasty line of storms, that could produce some damaging winds. You want to watch out for those. I mean, it looks like it gets very messy later this evening in Minneapolis also, if this run is right. And then I do think these storms start to turn into more so just embedded heavy rain as we start to get into Wisconsin. So the western U.S., the Southwest, the Southern Rockies continues to be very quiet. We will continue to get energy that will make its way into the Pacific Northwest, the Northern Rockies in the form of higher elevation snow, lower elevation rain. Seems like that's the most common thing I say in these videos. But you continue to make your way into the overnight hours, like Yellowstone National Park, the Southern Rockies of Montana. You guys will get some snow. Some snow will make its way to the higher elevations of Idaho. And not a whole lot of energy, but you guys will pick up the snowfall here in the Northern Rockies, this late season snowfall. So be mindful of that. But everybody down here is quiet. Now temperatures, nice and warm. this is why I do think we're going to get some severe weather today in areas of like New York State. I mean, you're going to get temperatures going to rise well into the 70s. So definitely some surface temperatures that support severe weather. We'll just see what happens. Well into the 80s in PA, New Jersey. Another warm one. Yesterday was some areas got into the low 90s in the mid-Atlantic. It's going to be kind of like that today also. A little bit more moisture in the air. Nice day in the southeast, very warm. You're getting closer to that pool weather if not already. A little bit of cooler air in the Ohio Valley, but still nice. 60s and 70s. Deep south, 70s and 80s. 80s, low 90s, some upper 70s across the south central U.S. We do got a little bit more cooler air up here in the north central U.S., 40s and 50s, but I don't think that'll stick around for too long. But the southwest, 80s, 90s, some areas just 60s. It just depends on where you live. But the southwest continues to be just smooth sailing. Just been nice weather lately, and it just really continues. But cooler, slightly below average temperatures up here because this area of low pressure in the northern Rockies, the Pacific Northwest. So that will continue. There is a severe weather risk for tomorrow, as this area of low pressure that we just spoke on, bringing you guys really cool temperatures across the northern Rockies, kind of begins to kind of ooze, I would say, southeastward. So this will kind of yank in all the ingredients from the south with its associated mid-level jet, and once again bring another severe weather threat, especially for Kansas. But you got Kansas already in an enhanced risk. Slight risk from Lincoln, Nebraska, all the way down to Fort Stockton, Texas. So another big severe weather day potential for tomorrow. We'll zoom into this in later videos, but enhanced risk, this is driven off a 5% risk of a tornado within 25 miles in a given location. This could increase in the brown. Wind threat, 2 isolated areas, kind of a bimodal setup. 15% risk of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour in this area, and the same thing in this yellow area. But in this black outline region right in here, including northern Kansas, southern Nebraska, 10% risk of winds exceeding 70 to 75 miles per hour. And then the hail threat will be significant, quite literally, tomorrow. 30% chance of hail exceeding 1 inch in diameter or larger within 25 miles in a given location in this red area. Yellow area, 15% risk of that. And if you live in this black outline region with the dashes going in between it, there's a chance of significant hail, 2 inch in diameter or larger. And, you look at the ingredients, you look at the moisture, and waking up tomorrow morning, moisture kind of rising up into Kansas. Look at those dew points, trying to get into the 60s all the way up to the southern Nebraska. So this is kind of for tomorrow, late afternoon, evening. You got some deep moisture in this pocket right here over Kansas, and this stretches, of course, all the way down to Texas. So you can check off the box of that moisture. Dew points well into the 60s, even some low 70s in certain areas. And, of course, you look at the fuel in the atmosphere of this also. Let's see if I already have that up. I already have it up. And we look at the CAPE levels in this setup. Okay, they're already rising tomorrow morning, right? But you start to get into tomorrow afternoon. Look at this rocket fuel. CAPE levels over 3,000 joules per kilogram, maybe some pockets over 4,000. And you got basically a dry line kind of setting up here, kind of bending, if you will, kind of a tilt to it. But tons of fuel in the atmosphere. But of course, your best lift for thunderstorms is going to be right up here, near the shortwave trough or surface low. It's going to try to develop at the base, southeast base of this area of lower pressure. But a lot of energy in the atmosphere, as you can tell, and this lasts throughout the evening hours, and then it gets ate up by storm development. And then speaking of the storm development, and we'll be done with this video after this, getting into tomorrow, okay, we're already going to have some moisture around and like Nebraska and areas of Kansas that you see right here, Missouri and Iowa. Some moisture is kind of dancing around tomorrow afternoon. And then it's what happens after that. There's this lone cell tomorrow evening that forms, potentially in northern Kansas. We got some big storms down here in Texas, and I'm not trying to leave off Texas. We will cover everybody in the next video. But just any of these isolated storms that gets going. There's that surface low right here. Any of them could produce all hazards. It's just figuring out where they are going to form. That's going to be the tough one. Okay, so that's all I got, guys. You guys have a wonderful day. Stay safe out there. And, of course, there's those storms that could produce all hazards right here on kind of a boundary here. But stay safe out there. God bless all y'all. Talk to you soon, and have a wonderful day.